Sometimes pressure is comfortable. Sometimes it feels safe. Sometimes it feels good and warm. And sometimes we don't want to walk away from it. But if we're not on purpose, if we're living the corporate life or we're doing someone else's work, even though we're getting the paycheck and we're getting the benefits and we're getting the ladder to success, if we're not on purpose, that's a pressure we need to overcome. And we need to look at that. And we're going to talk about that. Pat McManamon is next on Purpose Under Pressure. The heat is on. Let's get cooking. This is Purpose Under Pressure. It's a podcast about people just like you and me. We swing our feet out of bed every single morning. We do so on purpose. We're driven towards something. And then life happens. And what do we do then? When those storms rise to knock us down, that's called pressure. We're on purpose, and we're going to beat that every single time with help from stories like these. Don't forget to like us or follow us or subscribe or tell a friend or invite your mom to listen or whatever you need to do. The more people see this, hear this, know about this, the more of an impact we can make. And I do appreciate those clicks to let people know that this is something worth listening to. Purpose Under Pressure is brought to you by Sandler by the Ruby Group, serving sales professionals nationwide from their Akron and Columbus, Ohio locations, also in Jacksonville, Florida, which is what we're going to talk about a little bit today. Sandler is an amazing organization, and they have helped so many sales professionals and business leaders and organizational leaders. The Ruby Group, Sandler by the Ruby Group, takes it to another level. And I'm really impressed and proud and just really thrilled that they are part of this show. They see what we're trying to do here, and I see what they're trying to do, and I hope you will too. Check them out online at therubygroup.sandler.com. I kind of teased this a little bit and let you know that this is a little bit about Jacksonville, Florida, and we are here with our guest today. He is the senior partner with Sandler by the Ruby Group in Jacksonville, Florida, so he's leading the charge down there. I'm not sure. Pat, I'll go ahead and say Pat McManamon, welcome to the show. I appreciate your being on the show.
Thank you, Brian. I'm glad to be here.
I have been a part of Sandler sales training for a long time. I'm not currently affiliated with them now. I like to tell Mike, I've got all the sales training I need, thank you. And he laughs at me. But I've always wondered how you motivate salespeople in Florida, because that's got to be tough when there's a beach right next door. But maybe we'll talk about that a little bit. So Pat is the senior partner at Ruby Group, and he's down in Jacksonville, Florida, and he's turning things on there. And Pat, I'm glad that you're here. I'm glad that Sandler and the Ruby Group are sponsors of this program. I'm interested now in meeting you. You and I don't know each other very well. I've known a lot of Sandler folks, mostly through Ruby Group and through seminars and conferences. What drives you, Pat? What is your purpose, and why do you kind of do what you do on a daily basis?
I appreciate that. First of all, I want to thank you for circling back and including Jacksonville in the list of places where the Ruby Group is located, because we are here in Northeast Florida, the most recent addition to the Ruby Group. And so to answer your question, I joined the Ruby Group about 2 years ago after an ownership stake in Sandler Jacksonville for the last 23 years. And so what drove me, or what drives me still to this day, is just it has evolved, quite frankly. It was a survival first step, right? And then it was significance, and now it's an impact on people that I'm working with. And thankfully, I'm in a position to where I can tap out anytime I want, and I don't have any intention of doing that anytime soon, but it is a very freeing thought process. But because of that mindset, it allows me to focus on my clients, really press into what it is that they're challenged with and what they're dealing with. And it can be specific to sales technique, or it could be a lot of mental or psychological baggage, that we call it, that prevents people from being their full potential or reaching their full potential. And so seeing that is really what drives it, when we are able to, in fact, get people to open themselves up and stop telling themselves those nasty things that unfortunately we all say to ourselves at times, that we need somebody else to to be in our lives to tell us not to do it.
Right? Yeah, we need that friend to step on our shoulder and don't listen to the other part of the shoulder over here. Listen to me. All those different voices in our head. You said something, Pat, that I want to double back to. You said it was a moment of survival. And I've interviewed a few Sandler folks on the Purpose Under Pressure podcast and the podcast before this one. It seems like it's always a matter of survival. And it feels like it ties in with what people go through. We hit hard times. We don't know what's going to happen. And we have to make a decision. I don't know you well enough, Pat, but is that kind of what happened to you? And if so, can you share that a little bit?
Yeah, well, throughout the journey, there was a number of points where it felt like survival. But the specific thing that I think really illuminates the point, Brian, is that I left a corporate job to start this position or start this opportunity with Sandler. And I was well compensated. There was a lot of perks, and I had a wife, or I still have a wife and 2 children at the time that
they were counting on you.
They were 5 and 6 years old, and so there was at no point. What really drove me was not wanting to ever have to tell them that we've got to cut back because Dad made a decision to leave the logical corporate track that I was on, where paychecks came in consistently every 2 weeks and benefits were covered and all that kind of stuff, only to have to tell them that they couldn't participate in sports or extra school activities or extracurricular activities because there wasn't enough funds available to do that. So that was my driver at the time. And that was the survival piece of it, is to just as quickly as possible get back to the income that I was enjoying in the corporate life, but not feeling the purpose.
Yeah, I wanted to confirm that. You just did. It's not that you had the corporate job offered the easy path. Everything was fine then. Kids never had to worry about anything. It was that something inside you that wanted to do something different, and you were maybe afraid's the wrong word, cautious enough to say, geez, what if this doesn't work? You had that voice in your head saying you're never going to make it. This isn't going to work. And I'm interested. And that's what Purpose Under Pressure is all about. I'll tell you a little bit about how I think of this. You have a purpose. You're trying to accomplish something in life. And yet the pressure, which was the corporate job, the mortgage, the keeping things normal and everything, the pressure to maintain was so strong, it was knocking you off. And you wanted to do something that you wanted to do. Tell me a little bit about what wasn't matching up in the corporate life. What wasn't fulfilling you that you had to take that leap and risk having your kids look up at you and say, Daddy, what happened?
Yeah, it was kind of a buildup. I was not feeling gratification. No longer did I get jazzed when we landed a multi-million-dollar contract. No longer did I feel that when a new opportunity or a promotional opportunity was about, that I really wanted to pursue it, because we got to Jacksonville. We talked about Jacksonville earlier, and I moved 8 or 9 times in my career. But the last move was from Baltimore to Jacksonville. And in that move, once we got down here, we realized, wow, this is a special place, and we want to stay here. And so when I started thinking, because you get into that track or that mindset of, corporate's the only thing you know, and so you got to stay in that corporate life. And so I was thinking that perhaps if I made a change from one corporation to another, that would, reinvigorate me or provide the spark that I was looking for. But I quickly came to grips with realizing that if I put the word out that I was open, that was most likely going to require a move. Now, this is back before the days of negotiating for remote employment was a viable discussion. So that caused me to kind of turn to the thought about, what can I do on my own? What can I do from an entrepreneurial perspective? Because I always had that itch, and it was not seriously being addressed in the corporate world, because you're in a big corporation, you're just a cog in a big wheel, right? So
How'd it go when you made the switch? You knew you needed to do something. You wanted to be entrepreneurial. You joined or became how did it work with Sandler and the Ruby Group? Did you join right away, become a partner right away? Did you have to earn your stripes? I know you have to eat what you kill in that world, and it's a tough world to get started in.
Yeah. So with the Ruby Group, just to remind you, I just joined them about 2 years ago. So they bought my book of business. They bought me out as a franchise.
I see. Okay.
And not to get into too much of the weeds of the process, but it gave them access to the Florida market by them buying my franchise. Prior to that, all they had access to from a marketing perspective is in the Ohio market.
I see. So the thing that you were doing, the switching from corporate to Sandler and entrepreneurial, that was before Ruby Group. That was Correct. When you were really starting your own. So that was even harder. You were starting something without the basis of the second ranked, one of the biggest Sandler franchises in the country. You were starting it on your own.
Exactly. And the Sandler name was unknown within Northeast Florida at the time. We're going back again now, a total of about 25 years. And the Sandler name, even as you referenced it earlier, was not as well known as it is today around the country or even around the world. And so there was some difficulty. So when you talk about the pressure, one of the things that I banked on unknowingly was when I was in my corporate life, my last position, I was director of international sales, and I would call out to our prospects and they would either take my call or return my call. And then I got into this world where I was representing myself and this entity called Sandler. And lo and behold, apparently it wasn't me that was the gravitation of those prior customers. It was the corporate name.
It was that brand.
That was a rude awakening that I didn't have the brand that I thought I did. And so I really had to start from scratch. And so you talk about from a pressure perspective, just in the corporate world, a lot of times you're getting on a plane and you're going somewhere around the country. In my case, but then you start to realize I really need to get plugged in and become known in a known entity in this local market. And that was an uphill battle. Thankfully, we were able to plug into some key outlets that gave us some pretty quick traction. And, then we just started building on that.
Pat, did it go according to plan? You were worried about starting it, and you were worried about what your family, and you had bills to pay. We'll call it that. You had responsibilities.
Yeah.
And so you did it. You had to have a plan. Did it go according to plan? You already said that people weren't calling you back. How fast did you have to shift to turn that into something so that you kind of didn't miss a couple of meals along the way?
Yeah, it was, within the Sandler group, thankfully, there's a lot of people that are helpful. And so there were, during the down times or the slow times, people were more than willing to reach out and give guidance or counsel or a swift kick where you needed it. And then the other part, I guess, that was motivating to me is that, if I was holding myself out to be a sales development expert, sales development coach, it'd be pretty embarrassing if I wasn't doing what I was telling my people to do. So I use that oftentimes to really motivate myself when there were those times when the motivation was lacking, quite frankly, because I wasn't getting the traction I was hoping to get. So.
Ken Guest calls that doing the work, showing up, doing the work. You don't have to like the work. You just have to do the work.
Exactly. You don't have to like it. You just have to do it. Exactly.
And that's what you did. And so you took the Sandler ideas and the thoughts and the concepts and principles and put them to work for yourself in your business. Now and you turned it into something. Yeah. Now you're working with others who might be in the same boat. I'm interested in when you talk with other business owners or maybe they're on the corporate ladder and they're trying, they're salespeople trying to do things. I mean, that's who your target market is. Do you often find them to be in the same boat as you? And are you able to share empathy? And what do you tell them when they're trying to maybe be a bigger cog in the machine or build their own machine or whatever they're trying to accomplish? What are some stories that you have as far as the pressures that you see other people going through?
Yeah, one of the things that I've found, Brian, is that there was a book that was very popular a number of years ago called The E-Myth, and it was
Yes.
Michael Gerber, I think, was the
Gerber.
author. But he talked about the principle that a lot of times people from an entrepreneurial basis become passionate about doing the thing. And I think the example he uses, just to illuminate the point, I think he talks about poodle clipping, and they like to clip poodles.
They like dogs, and they like to be around dogs, and they start their own poodle clipping business. Yeah.
Yeah. Then they quickly realize that they have to also run a business, build a brand, do marketing, do financing, and all that kind of stuff. And before long, they realize that, wow, I'm not doing what I intended to do when I got in this business, because my job is running a business instead of clipping poodles. So that principle, I think, carries over into a lot of the conversations that I've had with business owners. A lot of them in the marketplace, our sweet spot is kind of the small and medium groups, probably 50 to 250 employees is probably a pretty good sweet spot for us. And one of the things that I have found, Brian, is that people that become impassioned about their business and, are proficient, quite frankly, they gravitate to what they're proficient at, will tend to try and shy away from the things that they're not proficient at. And oftentimes that, in the conversations I'm having anyway, it's related to sales or sales management. And one of the mistakes that I see is that oftentimes owners and proprietors or investors will try and offload that sales piece and then try and manage that. And it's a very difficult endeavor, because you can't, you can't be a product of the product, or you can't ask your people to do something that you yourself in your innermost being know that you couldn't or wouldn't do on a consistent basis. So we have to have those tough love conversations with those people. And that's oftentimes the most value that I think we get feedback on, is because when they're the top person, the top dog, the owner, whatever you want to call them, they are oftentimes surrounded by people that are smiling and nodding and agreeing with whatever they say. But they need somebody to really hold up the mirror oftentimes and say, listen, this is what I'm seeing. Are you seeing the same thing? And in that process, they're realizing, wow, I need this tough love. I need somebody else to hold me accountable. Because I have my name's on the door, or my it says owner on my business card, it doesn't give me the license to just do what I choose to do and not do what I don't like to do. And that is a cultural impact that people oftentimes don't realize, because it's kind of a soft component of running a business. But people are watching what the leadership and the owners do a lot more than what they're saying.
Do you find that it's tougher to train, if you will, a leader of an organization than, for lack of better words, the followers, the salespeople, the managers? Is it harder to train and drive the leader? Are they so set in their ways, or are they locked in it has to be done the corporate way? What's the differences between training leadership and then working with managers and salespeople? Is it harder?
I don't think so, Brian. I think the key difference is their purpose or their why. Yeah. So if we are introduced or we come across a business owner that is, as you say, set in their ways, or just they're comfortable, and they believe they've got it all figured out, then they're difficult, if not impossible, to try and change and move in a new direction. Now it gets exacerbated when it's an employee that's told to participate in our program. We refer to those people oftentimes as hostages. They're there despite their desire, and with that they display some of the activities that a hostage would, which would be some resistance or some lack of engagement. And We've got to be very careful with those people because they can derail a training session and distract the people that are there that want to be better. They do want to reach their full potential. So sometimes we have to have that tough conversation with the leadership that says, this guy or this gal is not going to make it. And so you can do whatever you want as far as keeping them on your payroll or not, but it's not worth it for us to try and change them. And it's not worth it for you to try and invest in them.
One of the biggest problems we have as managers and leaders is sometimes we're not focusing on leading and we end up doing it for our sales team. How do we coach our people to help them figure out what self-limiting belief that they have that's holding them back from achieving the levels of success that they know they're capable of? Help them flush out what we call their own head trash, that thing that's holding them back. So work with your team, lead by example, watch your team achieve greater levels of success, and watch your team grow, and more importantly, watch your company and your business grow.
Pat, people change all the time, and that's what you're dealing with is people. And you said, I think I heard you say you've been doing this thing for 25 years in different ways. What's the difference in people that you've seen? We know there's changes. We know the generational changes, but COVID happened and the workplace has changed and goals and drivers have changed. Can you see different pressures hitting the sales forces and the organizational leaders today than before? And are people handling it different? What's your experience there?
Yeah, I think the thing that comes to mind specifically, Brian, is the remote element of running an organization when more and more people are trying to, flex their desire to want to work remotely. That there's certainly merits to that. There's a lot of productive salespeople that will make a very strong case that they are more effective and more efficient by working remotely than they are by commuting 45 minutes to an office and being distracted by coworkers and then also commuting back another 45 minutes. But with that comes an added level of measure or scorekeeping. And that's where organizations need to leverage the technology that is now available to us, starting with the CRM. The CRM, I used to hear it all the time, is that, yeah, we have it, we just don't use it.
Yeah.
Or I just can't get my people to use it. And they always claim that it's under micromanagement. Now, under the carrot and stick approach, people or business leaders can say, well, I will let you do remote work as long as I'm seeing a consistent level of activity. And the only way that I can see that is by plugging into the CRM. So you've got to embrace the components and the tools that are there to help you in using the CRM. And if you're not willing to, then unfortunately you need to be under my watchful eye so that at least I see that you're at your desk or cubicle or in your office and it appears that you are working.
Yeah. Yeah. And what do you think about that? Do you think that that's the right approach from a manager? Because now we have people wanting to remote. We have the CRM as the carrot and the stick. There's I've been selling for a long time, and I used to argue with the folks at Sandler about the activity versus results. I always liked the results idea. Of course, I'm a salesperson. I'm not a manager. I wanted the results. That's what mattered. Don't tell me what to do.
Right.
Am I getting it done or not? But
right.
How should a leader approach that with, is it about activity? Or is it about whatever it takes to get the work done?
Well, I hear those as kind of the same, one and the same. So let's
Maybe
dissect that a little bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we talk a lot about, and I know you've probably heard it from Ken and or Mike, about the leading and lagging indicators.
Yeah.
Right. Most organizations have fallen in, I shouldn't say most, but a lot of organizations have fallen into the trap of focusing on the lagging indicators. And just for alignment, on understanding what we're talking about there, what I'm talking about is the lagging indicators is how many proposals did you do? How many deals did you close? What was your revenue for the month? Those are the byproduct of the activities that you know you need to do in order to get to those end results. Okay. The leading indicators are the activities such as how many new conversations are you meeting? How many initial appointments are you setting? How many requests for introductions are you doing per week, et cetera, et cetera. And we're seeing a byproduct of when you see those leading indicators and you focus on those, you can bet on the outcome, as we say within Sandler. So what I would suggest from a leadership perspective is allowing the individual to set their activity by direction and by frequency. Yeah. And then use that to either reinforce that they are on the right track or use that to say, where is it breaking down? And so what I love about the tool called the cookbook, which I know you're familiar with, is
yes,
that used properly, it can be used as a very effective coaching tool because it very clearly illustrates where the individual needs focus and development. So if a salesperson claims that they're making 500 outbound dials per week, and the person next to him claims to be making 50 outbound files per week, and the person making 50 is booking 4 appointments, and the person that's making 500 attempts is booking 0 appointments. Clearly, there's a messaging or a delivery component or a falsification issue, which is something that quickly rises to the top. Versus the other person. So if it's not a falsification issue, if it is truly a skill, then you say, well, let's figure out what person that's doing 50 and booking 4 appointments is doing that we can also have the other person doing and giving them the skills to do that. And that works all the way through the process. So number of efforts in order to get the appointments, number of appointments that turn into qualified opportunities, number of qualified opportunities that turn into closed deals. And each step of the way is from a leadership perspective is a tab to help them realize where their person needs their help. And that's where leaders and managers need to recognize one of their key roles, their most important roles, is developing their people. Too often times we find that sales leaders and managers get caught in the weeds of managing the numbers, and they're not even making eye contact with their people. When in reality, their key focus is developing their people and developing a culture of success.
Yeah. And that gets even back into the idea of purpose under pressure. That's what they need to be doing. And yet they've got somebody on top of them hammering down on it. Did I hit this number? Did I get this quote? Did I, have we done everything we're supposed to do? And the pressure builds on everybody all the way down to the bottom. I want to kind of bring us full circle as we near the end here. You mentioned earlier about the changes that you had to go through and the steps you had to take to make things work. And now, and I think I'm quoting here, you're able to tap out if you needed to, but you're loving what you're doing. I mean, I think there's a lot of people in that situation in this world. We're getting to a point where everybody's kind of looking at a bigger group of the population is looking at retirement opportunities, different things like that. It's just the way the world's working. What drives you now? Because you don't have to wake up in the morning and talk to a guy on a podcast, and you don't have to go out and try to find a new prospect or helping people. And you could just kind of hang out with your wife and live life. What drives you to be great at what you do now?
Yeah, well, let me back up a little bit to say what has kind of reoriented my thought process was about 2 years ago. I was surprised by a medical event. I had a heart attack, which followed by a quadruple bypass. And thankfully, everything is good. And I share that because it really gave me a new lease on life, to use a maybe overused phrase. But it gave me a very different perspective on my purpose for being on this earth. And, I'm a Christian, and I believe that, God has given me certain talents that I should not hold from others. And because of that, I'm continuing on with this process. truth be known, there's another component. I haven't figured out what else I could do to fill my days. And I did make the mistake of one day telling my wife that I was going to take the day off. Now, she has heard this before, so I'm not telling stories out of school per se, but I had always desired to take Fridays off because I heard one of my colleagues do that. And I said, I'd love to be able to do that. Cram 40 hours a week into the first 4 days and then take Fridays off. So I was never successful doing that. Invariably, I was booking appointments or whatever on Fridays. And so finally I had one day that I had scheduled nothing and I was wide open. And so the innocent question came, so what are your plans for today? And I said, absolutely nothing. I've got nothing scheduled. I've done all my behaviors for the week and I'm just going to relax and chill. Mm-hmm. And that conversation then was followed with a list of honeydew items that about halfway through the list, I was thinking, boy, I would much rather be working.
I want to go back to work.
Exactly. So, so I tread lightly when I get that question now going forward I use the old Sandler technique, which is you're asking me that for a reason, right? That's the reverse.
Yeah, reverse it back and see what she says. I'm interested, Pat. I'm not going to let you off this easy now, knowing that. What drove you then before the heart attack? Yeah. You've already talked about what drives you now. What was the big realization that needed to change? I'm not going to let you get off that easy. What was wrong then that the heart attack kind of woke you up to? That's a good question. I think what it came down to, Brian, is that that I was sweating the small stuff a little bit more than I should have. I was worrying about things that were not within my control, and that was starting to cause some internal stress that they claim is probably one of the reasons that it happened, other than genetics. But just a quick story, anecdote to kind of illustrate that. Shortly after I was in recovery, I was going to a client's office to do some coaching, and along the way, I was probably about 7 minutes from being there, and I was only 2 minutes away. But about 500 yards from their building is a railroad track. And as you can imagine, train came by. So I sat there and I was reflecting on what a nice day it was and how the people next to me looked like they had a brand new car and they were really enjoying it, and a bunch of other kind of just life enjoyment moments. And I was not at all fretting about the fact that I might be a couple minutes late to get to the office, because it was 100% out of my control. I couldn't do anything other than jump over the train as it was speeding by. Mm-hmm. So that little story helped me realize that did give me a mood altering perspective on life, to where it's like, worry about and focus on the things that you can affect, but the other things, don't let them get in the way of just enjoying each day that we're blessed to be on this earth. Boy, isn't that the truth? We talked before the show a little bit about what I hope this show does for people. And you were hopefully, Pat, just that heart attack. I hope. I'm not trying to over dramatize, but for anyone listening that's kind of stuck, where am I going? What am I doing? What am I trying to do? You've just showed them how they can take a step into what they were meant to do and how they can stop sweating this. It's going to be okay. Would that be what you would tell people, is take that step and go? Or what would your final kind of piece of advice be for someone that hasn't had the heart attack, either thankfully or not, right? Depending on how you look at it. But they're stuck. What would that last piece of advice be?
Yeah, make sure they focus on the purpose and just identify the things that you can do and recognize the things that are outside of your control and eliminate those from your thought process. Because the inability to affect those things is really, I think, what causes the most pressure and stress that people feel.
Realize where you're at and do with what you can. Last question. Is it really hard? I said this at the beginning of the show. Is it harder to be a salesperson when sales kind of sucks sometimes? Like you're constantly beating your head against the wall and you're grinding and you're working and sometimes coming home with nothing. You're in Jacksonville, Florida. There's a beach right there. How hard is that to motivate people?
Well, it's it doesn't, between beaches and golf. That's what I'm constantly being accused of. It's like, oh, I know you need to get off this call, Pat, because you probably got to go golfing. But I think it's just like anything else. The novelty of it wears off, and people realize that they've got to do what they need to do, and so we tend to go to the beach and to golf or any of the other things that we might enjoy, fishing or. Usually when other people from somewhere up north come down and visit us, right?
Yeah.
Just like when somebody says, if you were in Cleveland and how often do you go to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? Well, I went once initially, and now I only go when I'm taking other people there.
When I have to take someone else. Yeah. People in Buffalo don't go to Niagara Falls, right? That's exactly the way I think of it. Pat McManamon is a senior partner with Sandler by the Ruby Group. He's in Jacksonville, Florida. He's doing things that matter for reasons that matter. And Pat, thank you for being a guest on the show. Thank you for sharing. Thank you being a little bit vulnerable. I don't know if you intended to share that about you, but I appreciate that you're just kind of shared that pressure and how it changed your life.
Yeah, my pleasure, Brian. Glad to be here.
That's Pat McManamon. He is a senior partner and kind of a really important piece of the growth strategy of Sandler by the Ruby Group. I know that Florida sounds like a great place to be, but it's also a great place to kind of be. And I think there's a lot of people there and a lot of business to be had. And I'm glad that Sandler's down there and the Ruby Group is down there making a difference. So thank you, Pat, for being a guest on our show. Purpose Under Pressure, brought to you by Sandler by the Ruby Group. Sellers are under pressure to perform. That's why this partnership makes so much sense. Sandler helps you to succeed on purpose. You'll find all past episodes of Purpose Under Pressure at brianmediastrategies.com/podcast and wherever you stream your favorite shows. We do this every week, and we will see you next time on Purpose.